Hey guys, this is Killrob speaking, and today we are going to take a closer look at the car stats which are going to be implemented in the next bigger patch and their dependencies, and they are not really shown in game yet. So what we are going to do may be a bit weird. We have to take a look at a text file, but first we take a look at what this text file will be showing. I have been building 4 different platforms, which are all pretty much different. Small, eco, city, hatchback, a standard-ish mid-range family car, a very high-end luxury car, maybe not very high-end, but pretty high up there, pretty large as well, and a very sporty little car. And we are going to take a look at the sporty car first and then test it, and then after that we are going to take a look at the resulting stats from that test. So, revised model. And there it is. So, what do we have here? This is a fine sir with a nice moustache and a fat ass. So I have built this platform with carbon fiber chassis, and I think it's aluminium body shell. So it's pretty lightweight. It's very modern though, so it's still fucking heavy. Alright, but double clutch, 6 gears. It's geared for sportiness basically. And let's take a look at the engine. It's a 4.0 liter flat plane V8. This one. And let's choose revise so that we can take a look at it. As you can see, very sporty setting, pretty high cam profile. Used VVT, I think. But naturally aspirated. It's kind of well tuned, lots of power output, but nothing special per se. Just very high end. And good components in there as well, like forged stuff, lightweight forged, so it's a limited series, definitely. No mass production there. So yes, we are choosing that engine, and we are putting it in. Did this one wig out? No, it didn't. 349, one. Maybe better like this. Need to go a bit higher. Yes, alright, so now we're back where we should be. And I've put on bigger tires, 275s in the back and 235s in the front, 16-inch rims, and some pretty aggressive brake settings, a bit bigger brake discs we need here, and then aerodynamics. So what I have done here is choose a fully clad version, and then we have set the cooling capacity to something which makes sense, but also divert a bit of airflow to the brakes, to the front brakes. While I do have wings on here, I do choose, and lips actually, here's a lip as a wing, and we have a lip in front as well. I choose the aerodynamic inclination, the angles, attack angles for the wings and lips to be very low. I just want to balance out the car a bit better than it is by itself. And I do not want to incur a lot of penalty on the aerodynamic efficiency. So yeah, downforce is set low, 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 so we want to go fast still. For the interior, I'm choosing the, well, there's still no option for just a 2-seater, so it's probably a bit too heavy. But we are using the super light interior. We are going for a bit more loud but light inside, and very basic entertainment options, but premium safety options. And then all the driving assists, because people cannot drive, especially people who buy sports cars. Alright, so that should be that. Pretty aggressive camber settings for better cornering. Low ride height, pretty stiff spring settings to compensate for the low ride height, and get you through the corner, and it's a pretty light car. So 1,150 kilos there. And the test results look the following way. So we have 370 kilowatts from the engine, and pretty good acceleration time, 4.5 seconds from 0 to 100. All in all, very sporty. The cornering statistics here is still a bit broken, should be a bit higher. Economy is pretty bad, but what would you expect from a car like that? We do have slight downforce at 200 kilometers an hour, which you have to remember. Downforce, actual downforce, is actually very seldom in cars. Usually you have a lot of lift if you don't place wings and so on. So having a bit of downforce is actually really nice for balance at high speeds in comparison to even sports cars most often. So that's kind of it. So we are going to take a closer look at the stats this produces. And one thing I want you to keep in mind is this little curve, which is below the blue line. So it's a bit understeery, but rather neutral to the top there. We're going to discuss this a bit later. So, alright, let's jump into the stats and dependencies. So here we are in the text file, which outputs currently all the car stats and the factors and dependencies. And it's pretty complicated, as you will see. There are 5 main car stats. That is prestige, safety, sportiness, tameness, and comfort. In addition to that, of course, you will have cost and MTBF and so on. But let's take a look at these car stats first and go through those. So prestige is basically a measure of how much penis extension the car is. And yeah, that basically depends on stuff which is rare. So the more cylinders you have, the better prestige. Then you have, that is a base value which is calculated. Also, the more engine capacity you have, the higher the prestige. If you have a 16-liter V16, then that would be pretty prestigious. If you are running a turbo, that gives you a bit of a bonus, but we aren't, so you won't see that. If you have high power output, that looks really nice on paper and grows a few inches down there. Then for the interior quality, you do get a bonus if you choose very nice interior there. Entertainment, same thing, but the effect is a bit subdued. So then we have the chassis. And if you're choosing a advanced material, for example, carbon fiber chassis, like in this case, you get 15% bonus because it is so awesome. And for the panel material, in this case, aluminium, you do also get a bit of extra prestige. In this case, 2%. Then we have the rim diameter. If you have huge rims on there, that makes the car look awesome, and people think your dick is small. So that must be adding a lot of prestige. In this case, we have hit the sweet spot of that being a factor of 1. Then we have the top speed value. In this case, it's really high, so the car becomes a bit more prestigious. And the drive type, if you have all-wheel drive, that is always a bit cooler than having this lame front-wheel drive. This is then added up, the base values are added up, and then multiplied by all these factors, and this gives the total prestige value. The same thing happens for safety. For safety, there are not quite as many dependencies. We do have the base safety value, which is basically coming from the year the car is produced in, and then the weight value, because it's always better to be the heavy one in any crash. If you sit in your Smart and there comes a Humvee with 200 kilometers an hour and crashes into you, I don't think you will have much chance of surviving. Weight is not replaceable in crashes. So the safety value, just to clarify, is when you crash. It is not active safety, but passive safety. So as it doesn't hinder you from crashing, but it makes it safer when you do. So there's a factor for the chassis, in this case carbon fiber. We know carbon fiber monocoque chassis are extremely sturdy and they will probably not break if you're not Paul Walker or something, but he didn't have carbon fiber either. So then you have the footprint factor. The larger the car is, the more crumple zones and shit you have in there, so that makes the car safer if you have a big footprint. Then you have the safety package, which is one of the biggest factors in there, and that's right here, adding 30% to the final value. And for the engine placement, if you have the engine in the front, then the car is a bit safer because there's more between you and the wall, so to say. This car has a pretty high safety value of 56. And then you see sportiness, the third main stat, and there are a lot of dependencies in there. First of all, we have a circle driving test, as you have seen in the stats already. That gives you the maximum lateral acceleration. And then we have a base value from the 0 to 100 time, and a base value given by the braking distance. So the shorter the braking distance, of course, the more sporty it is. Then there are a few more factors from the circle test, and this one is probably the most interesting one out of these. And this is where I said you have to keep the graph in mind, and that was the oversteering or understeering. You have a higher multiplier here if your car oversteers slightly, and the more tame it is, the more understeery it is, the less sporty it becomes. And you cannot be perfectly sporty and perfectly tame at the same time. That's just a compromise. So you have to adopt your suspension settings accordingly. For the cylinders, you do get a nice little boost here, just 3%. The more cylinders you have, the more sporty it seems on paper. Then power, of course, also really nice on paper. Even though your car weighs like 50 tons, it's that 1000 kilowatt would still look impressive. Then you have your gearbox setting, and this is basically how your gear spacing is. The more narrow and sporty it is, the higher your multiplier here. And then we have a factor for the engine responsiveness. The more responsive, of course, the better, but this is directly a counter to tameness, because it becomes quite aggressive and bites. So then we have the roll test. The lower amount of roll you have, the more sporty the car feels. Then we have loudness. The louder the car is, the more sporty it feels. And this is the loudness on the inside of the car, not on the outside. Then we have the torque integral, which is pretty interesting. This is basically the stuff you have seen in my power and torque video, where I talked about acceleration. You find it here on our channel. And this is how much area is above the line, the diagonal line. And then you have a red line factor. The higher you rev, the more sporty it is, and the gear ratios, how many gears you have. I think that's that, and how aerodynamic the car is. And you have a bit for tire profile, the brake pad type. The more aggressive it is, the more sporty it feels. A value for downforce. If you have a neutral car or a bit of downforce, you get a slight advantage here because it's so cool. And then top speed, of course, that makes a car a bit more sporty. That's a bigger factor, 10% there. And dynamic response is basically from tires and suspension and so on. The drive height, the lower it is, of course. And then we have the ESP. Yes, it feels less sporty when you are not allowed to go exactly to the limit. And launch control adds a bit of penis extension at the traffic lights, so that's always a factor, a bonus. Power steering takes away from the direct feel of the car. So in this case, where we chose power steering, we get a 5% penalty on sportiness. And then we have suspension options. That's all kinds of suspension stuff. Then very interesting, the brake fade. That's still a bit broken in here, but that's how often you can brake full power before the car starts losing its braking performance. Pretty important. You can offset this by cooling. So in this case, we have pretty good brakes. There's big brake capacity available, and overheating is basically a non-issue in this case. Then, yeah, that's just some calculations for fixing this value. And we add up to a total sportiness of almost 65, which is a really high value. Then we have tameness. That is basically how drivable a car is, and a very important factor for almost all cars. If you build your sports cars with those huge ass turbos, then you will quickly find that it's almost impossible to drive, and your tameness value will be so low that no one will buy it. That's basically how often you die per 1,000 kilometers. You could see that as the tameness value. And here we have pretty much the same as sportiness to a large degree, but a bit in reverse, you could say. What is not in reverse is the cornering performance, because you need to do quick maneuvers if you want to avoid crashing into something. So better cornering performance is always better. You get a bit of a base value from your suspension settings, and here we have a factor from the cornering. If your car is understeery, you get a more tame behavior. And then we have the power to weight ratio. That's kind of a quality for checking, are you able to flow with the traffic? Like, do you have enough power to fluidly just flow with the traffic and don't cause problems, i.e. crashes? Like getting on the Autobahn with 30 kilometers an hour definitely will be a bit bad for your health, I would say. Alright, then we have the torque curve. That's basically a factor which is calculated how flat is the torque curve, or how predictable is the torque curve. Not really flat, but it can be a rising line as well, or it can be a dropping line, but how predictable is the torque curve. So there again, if you build your huge ass turbo, which has a huge turbo hole, then your tameness will suck, because you always spin out of your city cornering performance there and crash into old ladies. So that wouldn't be very tame. Then for the tires, normal tires give highest tameness. That is for bad weather, basically. If you have semi-slicks on, then good luck driving in the rain, especially if you have wide tires. And for the brake pad type, we have a bit of a factor in here. Depending on how aggressive the brakes are, you don't want to have overly aggressive brakes, especially in conjunction with no ABS. That would be pretty bad. So there's a factor on tameness there. Then we have the braking distance. That's a base value again. The shorter the better, of course. A value for the footprint. Smaller cars are easier to drive because you know where you are, where you have the car. So that goes in there as well. The drive type, again, in this case it was rear wheel drive, which is the least tame of drive types. And then you have the dynamic response. That's again from tires and so on. And then we have what is the factor steering? I can't even remember right now. But the wheel spin, yes, that calculates how much you spin throughout the gears. And the more you spin, of course, the less tame it is. This can be offset to a large degree by traction control. It's not perfect, of course, but that helps to get the tameness. So basically, this value would have been 0.80 in the case of no traction control. So that makes a huge difference. That's also something which is pretty interesting. You can, in automation, that naturally means that you can only start building really powerful cars if your electronics can back them up. So that gives a really nice progression in the game, which is very realistic. Then effective drive height is interesting as well. The lower you sit, the less you see the traffic. So it's hard to gauge the traffic movement when you're sitting so low that you cannot see in front of the Fiat Panda, which is holding you up in front of you. Then for ABS, of course, gets more tame, ESP gets more tame, and roll angle, can't really remember how that was done. It's more like Martin's stuff doing. Wheel load and so on, not quite sure about that either. It's all black magic from Martin. And then we have another suspension options and then a total tameness value. That's pretty good tameness, especially for a rather high-end sports car. But you definitely want to keep it there. The faster the car is, the more tame it needs to be. Otherwise you will suffer from dying customers, which is not a very good thing. Then we have the final stat in here, which is comfort. And comfort is also calculated mainly from the suspension you have, from the interior you have, and let's see, responsiveness. Too high responsiveness is not very comfortable. Like if you basically touch the pedal and you break your side passenger's neck, that is not appreciated. Then from the roll test, the more you roll, the less comfortable it is. There's kind of an optimum as well. If it's rock hard, then you don't want that either. The smoothness from the engine, pretty important. The sound insulation. If the car is loud, as in this case, we made it pretty loud, then of course it's not really comfortable. Then we have the torque integral again. That basically is a value which tells you, can you be lazy in the car? Like just stay in first gear and drive it. So that's again related to the torque curve, and it's directly opposed to sportiness in this case. So then we have again the steering stuff. That's probably from power steering. Right, that's from power steering. If you have power steering, then it's then it is 1. If you don't have that, then it's dependent on the weight of the car, and it gets the heavier the car is, the more horrible it becomes. It's not very comfortable to have no power steering in a 2.5 ton car. For the brake pads, you want to have smooth braking maneuvers, so you suffer a bit if you put them on sporty. And of course you have an entertainment factor in here, 0.98 for the, I think, standard we chose there, and a total comfort of pretty low. 20 is not very comfortable. Alright, that was a lot of stats, and you see the complexity which goes into this game. And every stat in the game, every single setting in the game, apart from the purely cosmetic choices, actually go into these stats. So keep that in mind. It's a hugely complex system, and now we are going to take a look at the examples of those. But this, I think, I save for the next video. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening and watching, and see you guys next time.